Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Solution Spotlight webinar on building effective industrial data dashboards. We have some best practices to share, as well as some real-world examples. Let's get into it. My name is Molly Colwell, and I'm an applications engineer with DataPark. I've also worked as an implementation engineer in the past, building lots of graphics and seeing what works and what doesn't quite work. Our other presenter today is Sarah Sumner. I'll go ahead and let her introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Sumner. I'm a senior implementation engineer, and I've been with DataPark for about 10 years. I have roughly 5 years of experience in the paper industry as an embedded resource, and my focus has been cost reduction, project management, and mentoring.
Awesome. As always, if you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to type them in to the question box or the chat, depending on which version you see. And if we aren't able to get your question during the webinar or at the end during our Q&A, we'll go ahead and send you an email about that or post the question when we post the recording. I also wanted to explain briefly the different types of webinars we have. So today is the Solution Spotlight, which will be recorded and available on our community forum and our YouTube page in the coming days. We also have DataPark University webinars, which are exclusively on our community forum, and they're more training type videos. Additionally, we have Industrial Data Insights webinars, which are posted on YouTube and are more conceptual webinars. Our focus for today is building effective manufacturing dashboards, and we have some examples and best practices. However, unlike our DataPark universities, we're not going to get quite into the nitty-gritty step-by-step details of how to create such dashboards in our Park Graphics Designer. But we do have a resource page available in the handout section of this webinar, and we'll get to those details at the end. And for the agenda, as I mentioned, we're talking about effective dashboards, so we'll kick things off by explaining why effective dashboards matter in manufacturing. Then we'll go over some of our tips for best practices for dashboard design, as well as giving you some examples of ineffective and more effective dashboards side by side, so you know what we're talking about. Then we'll jump over to some real-world experiences that our customers gave us for their best practices before we look at ways to improve existing dashboards. So how to elevate your existing dashboards to make them a little more readable. And finally, we'll look at our resources and have time for Q&A. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Sarah.
Thanks, Molly. So why do effective dashboards matter? Let's talk a little bit about what makes a dashboard effective. So some things that make it effective are a standardized layout. Consistency is key when you're building dashboards that go across process areas. And you also want it to present relative data or relevant data. You want it to be relevant to your audience. So who's looking at this dashboard? What information is applicable to them? There's a big difference in designing a dashboard for management versus designing a dashboard for an operator. You also want to enhance decision making. So you want to have a display that has live data. You want to have gauges, alerts. You want to have quick access to historical data by double-clicking and opening a trend. All of that's very important for an effective dashboard. And then you also want to promote actionable insights. So these are going to be highlight KPIs, anomalies. You want your operators and your management to be proactive rather than reactive in their decision making. And you can do that with an effective dashboard. So why do we care about dashboard design? It improves your decision making. You can take really complicated data, really complex data, and simplify it using a variety of things like gauges, trends, or images. You can increase your productivity. Your operators will spend less time searching for information when they have a standardized format to follow. And you'll have higher user adoption. Intuitive dashboards mean that more people are using them. If it's easy to understand and easy to read, it makes your operators and your managers happy. And then there's also a business impact component. So actionable information increases communication and efficiency. Once again, our goal is to be proactive when things come up rather than reactive, because that reduces that impact to the business. So let's take a look at some best practices for that dashboard design. Number one is layout and visual hierarchy. So we want to organize that key data in a natural reading order for your language. So for North America, a lot of times it is left to right, top to bottom. So your most important information should be towards that upper left side, and your less important information should be in your bottom right. If you have things that are large elements, you want to give them space so that people can read them easier. So the last thing is a user-friendly structure. You want to group related data together and create distinct sections. It's going to be confusing for your paper machine operators if you have white liquor flow right next to their OEE. So try to group information that is related to each other into distinct sections. Second is color usage. Color is very important, and you want to select color for readability. You want a consistent color scheme between your different process areas. This helps reduce confusion when you are looking at multiple displays, one right after the other. And you want to avoid overwhelming a viewer with too many colors. So if you have a huge color scheme, colors all over the place, it can be overwhelming to the eyes, and it can also reduce that readability. It is important to use contrasting colors. So you need contrast to highlight important data and alerts. Are they too low on their availability? Are they really high on their availability? You can use colors to indicate these different things, and it will allow for a better interpretation of the graphic overall. And then the last thing we want to touch on is colorblind accessibility. More and more, we're finding that people are unaware that they're colorblind and are finding out in adulthood that they may have some kind of accessibility issues regarding color. So it's important to choose color palettes or to choose alternative imagery to indicate when there is a color change. So instead of red-green, you're going to want to choose something that is going to be highly visible to people who may have colorblind accessibility issues. You can also use blinking. You can use other images, you could use other colors. All of those would work as well. So let's take a look at balancing simplicity and detail. So you want clarity over complexity. You want to prioritize that core data and avoid excessive data that may cause clutter. So this example has those key things that we want to focus on: broke storage, downtime, production rate, availability, OEE efficiency. And then we layer that with drill down or drill view options. So I'm able to see that maybe my press section has an alert that I need to address. I could then click on that press section and expand a drill down view that gives me more information about the press section rather than detailing it all on my overview page. So let's take a look at some dashboard examples. And first, we're going to look at ineffective process dashboards. So this is an ineffective process dashboard. There's a lot going on this display. It's showing me multiple process areas at the same time. It's showing me multiple EVAPs. It has a lot of color, but that color is used unnecessarily. Yes, it is showing me some flow lines, but the colors don't actually indicate anything. They're not indicating a high or a low value. It's just making this display look busy. And I can't identify a priority that I should be looking at. My red and pink here is confusing to the eye when in fact I should be looking at those very small numbers that are on that left-hand side to determine priority in this display. And because I'm looking at multiple units, it becomes overcrowded and busy. So let's take a look at a more effective process dashboard. So in this case, I have purposeful color. My colors are using to identify areas. They're showing stopped equipment, and it is showing actual values. So when I see a blue value, I know that that is an actual tag value. And if it changes to green or to red, I know that it is either high or low compared to its set point. So my value colors are very purposeful. This also has focused information. It's showing me one process area. It's showing me one paper machine from the head box to the steam box. It is not showing me all 5 or 10 different paper machines at once. It is focused on just one process area. And then I have my values grouped. So all my values are grouped based off of their controller or by their relevant information to the process area. So let's take a look at an ineffective lab dashboard, since that is another type of dashboard we frequently see. So we've got 2 examples here. The first one with that dark blue background is an example of low contrasting colors. The light blue against the dark blue is very hard to read, particularly for someone who has low vision or someone who maybe has reading glasses or just a slight vision impairment. And then the second example has too many colors. There's too many colors, too many boxes. It's very difficult to see the overall status of the process area because there's so much going on. And then finally, there's poor alignment. The lines that are in, particularly that second example, they don't line up. Even though everything is in grids, the lines don't line up, and it can make it confusing, can make it difficult to read for the user. So we want to make sure things are aligned, we're not using too many colors, our colors are indicating important information, and there's enough contrast between our colors for readability. So let's take a look at a more effective lab dashboard. In this case, we're using high contrast colors. We have a light background that allows us to use more of those high contrast colors, and I am using red, blue, and black or gray to indicate those different colors. In addition to that, not only am I using color change to indicate out of spec values, I'm also using arrows to indicate if a value is too high or too low. This gives someone who has a color blindness accessibility issue the ability to read my graphic efficiently and quickly. And then my information is broken into sections. Similar values are all grouped together. So I have all of my shade values grouped together, all of my surface values grouped together, all of my auto line values grouped together. They're not spread out across the screen.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Now we can go over some real-world experiences that our customers shared with us. Our first suggestion is to create a style guide for dashboards at your site. This will include resolution, font, color, and even objects or graphic images and themes. A dashboard resolution can impact how much information you can fit on the screen. You'll want to be sure to try and utilize the entire rectangular space of your monitor. Consistency in screen layout and resolution will help increase readability as you move from graphic to graphic. Additionally, standardizing the font style, color, and size can also assist in transitioning from one graphic to another. This can help the decision-making process and prompting additional insights like Sarah was talking about. It can also help identify anomalies. For example, if you have a person moving from one department to another, or maybe a person visiting from another site, they can open up a graphic for the first time and see a graphic very similar to their previous department or their previous site, which means they don't have to learn what the new colors mean or formatting because everything is consistent. They can quickly identify what needs to be addressed and go after that issue. Another way to promote readability and consistency across graphics is by choosing a certain design or style for graphical objects. Whether it's 2D or 3D, having consistent styles can help read data consistently. For example, Parkview has quite a few different gauge options. Some are full circles, some are half circles, some change colors, and others don't. So by having consistency across your gauges will make it so people don't have to learn what each type of gauge means and how to read it. They can look at it and instantly know what data they're looking at. Another style suggestion was to utilize label consistency that's already established throughout your plant. For instance, it's industry standard that water pipes are labeled with green and compressed air is labeled in blue. So taking those standards that are already established across the plant and incorporating them into your graphic makes reading them easier. You no longer have to scan and read every single piece of information. You can quickly find the green or blue piece of information and know that that is going to correlate with water or air, respectively. And the last note is creating a process flow, whether you're going to do that with images or boxes. Process flow diagrams are a great learning tool for new hires. They can see the entire process on one screen, see where the pipes connect, and overall learn how the process works. This also helps with troubleshooting, since the user can trace back lines and see what is feeding into what. In this top example, we have a box process flow diagram. So we have two mills here, and they actually end up going into the same feed section. And we might not know that without a dashboard like this. The second part of the story is dashboard management. How are you going to manage and maintain the dashboards once they've been created? We'll start with storing locations. So the Z users folder. Now, if you already have Parkview, then you probably have this folder. It's very standard upon implementation, but you might be wondering why there's a Z in front of it. It's simply there to keep it at the bottom of your list so it doesn't interfere with the rest of your display folders. This folder is designed for individuals to save their own Parkview-related files. So if they wanted to make a trend or maybe practice working on graphics, this is a great place to store those displays. We typically have the Z users folder open to all, which means you can create your own folder, preferably with a common name such as first initial, comma, last name, or whatever your site standard is. As for the other process folders, the security on that is up to the customers. Some customers have taken the path to lock down the process folder and keep the Z users folder open. They give few people access or maybe one department access to update those process folders. This means they can keep visual standards across those process folders because not everyone can upload a new graphic or make edits. On the other hand, this could mean slower potential updates to the graphics as only some people can update them. A few quick comments on Z user folder maintenance. Some sites have found that the Z users folder is getting very, very long because you have a lot of different people adding their names to them. People leave the company, new people come in, and you just have all these folders. Two suggestions to this. First, you can create subfolders within the Z user folder, maybe by alphabet. So maybe 5 folders. One is A through E, the next is F through J, K through O, and so on. And so people can put their individual folder in those alphabetical folders. And so you don't have to scroll so far to find your folder, especially those people at the end of the list. The second is to create an archive folder for maybe someone who has left the company and you want to retain the work or the things they have in their folder, or you want to look through them at a different time. You can go ahead and create an archive folder so it's no longer in the middle of the mix that people are opening every single day, but you have access to it if you need it. So something that can happen regardless of which control structure you use is the duplicate of displays now from the original displays folder into users folder. These displays can become out of date and people can find them broken. Be sure you encourage employees to use the regular displays within the displays folder and not constantly using the displays out of their Z users folder. Great, now let's move on to improving existing dashboards. Here we have an example of a dashboard where we have some good things going on. We have items grouped well, we have a dark contrast with a light color, but one thing that is kind of struggling is that alert color, that red, kind of dark against the dark background. So let's see if there are some options we can do to fix that. So here are a few proposed solutions. Our original color is that first, that upper text color under 5 reboiler. Kind of hard to see against the dark color. Starting on the left-hand side, under 4 reboiler, we could try and make it a little lighter, a pink color. Alternatively, we could try a brighter red. Now, both of these you can see a little better, but that bright red in general is hard to read. So an alternative is actually to change the background color of the text. So we'll keep that red the same, but we'll change the background color, which will do two things. One, it increases that contrast for us, and second, it creates a second flag as to something being out of spec, which will help for those who have color blindness. Now here's another example from the same company. So we see those similarities across dashboards, which is nice. We have consistent font, resolution, and size. However, in this case, we're struggling with including a secondary visual indicator, and we're really solely leaning on color to identify when something's out of spec. So in this example here at the bottom, we have the left-hand side showing the original out of spec value and that color contrast, which isn't great. And then we have an alternative. So we could either include a flashing background as a possibility. We could add a circle with the color instead. So the text is the same, but the color is on the circle, which will identify that we're out of spec. You also have an option to create an icon or maybe an arrow identifying that you're too high or too low. And alternatively, you could maybe change the boldness or add an underline or maybe italicize the font. So these are all things you can do in addition to changing the color to help with the accessibility. And some resources here before we get to Q&A. So we'll start with some Parkview specific tips to create those really nice looking graphics. First, I just wanted to point you guys in the direction of our arrange feature. So if you have multiple objects, you can highlight them or select them, right click, and then arrange, and choose how to align them, whether that's left or the top, kind of get them in a straight line. Some key things I want to point out here, you can also make all the objects the same size. This is really helpful. And you can space them vertically or horizontally evenly. So this is great so that your spacing looks really nice and consistent from one object to the next. The second feature I wanted to show was in the view section, you have the snap and the grid. Now, snap will kind of what it sounds like. It will snap the object to a certain height. And if you have that grid, you can actually see where it's going to snap to, as long as you don't have a background enabled. So the snap and grid can really help you align objects across your dashboard. Next, I wanted to show that you can actually create a template with Parkview. So to do this, you go File, New, and then you'll get a pop-up. And from here, you can expand it to more options. And the settings I like to change are the font and the font size. So I think by default, the font size is about 12 pixels, which is a little small. If you choose 18 or something else, then any tag you drag in there, any text box you start with is going to start at a font size of 18, and you're not going to have to adjust them all when you manipulate them. You could also maybe save a background color, save a couple color swatches or something like that to help you build your SOP and style guide for your dashboards. And then you could save this, maybe save a few copies so people don't accidentally save over it. Next is what I call full coverage background. So you may have seen a graphic that has white bars on the side. Now, in order to get rid of those, you actually need to set the PV display control background instead of the canvas background. So by doing this, you go to the control section, select PV display control, and then you go to properties and set the background there. And this will make the entire graphic background what you want it, and you'll no longer have those white bars. And lastly, we have dashboard management. Now I put an asterisk here because this is going to be an administrative feature and really only need to be used if you find that you're having duplicates of displays and that's becoming an issue for you. So in SQL, if you have access to SQL at your site, you can view the CTC metrics table and you can see which graphic or which display is being used more often, especially if you have duplicates. And then you can let those people know who are using the display that's not being used often, say, hey, we're not using this display, we're using this other one, and you can tell them the folder location. Again, this is an admin feature. And finally, here are all those resources we've kind of mentioned throughout the webinar. A PDF is in the handout section, which you can access, and it actually has the links that you can click on. This will also be available on the community forum. But those first two are external websites, which you can upload different colors or images to see how they actually contrast or if they are okay with color blindness. And then wanted to point out some data park universities for building graphics. That's our basics and our more basics. And then lastly, we do have two quick tips, which are less than 5 minutes each, which just show how to change the color of a background based on a limit. So that's simply changing the color. And then a second one is how to create a flashing effect based on a tag limit or value. So those are both very quick, less than 5 minute tips. And all of those links are available in the handout. That's all I have for you today, and we'll jump over to some questions. Okay, it looks like our first question is about changing the color in graphics. So Sarah, is there any way that you can change all the colors if you're wanting to do a revamp in graphics at once?
Yeah, so if you found that your standard color is problematic, it's low visibility for whatever reason, you can go into, it's called the XAML, XAML, and you can edit all those colors at once. So if you have done a lot of mapping on your graphic where you have the text changing colors, based off of a tag value, you can actually switch out, let's say your red is difficult to see. You can switch that out all at once by changing the hexadecimal code in the XAML. And there's a button for that. Actually, we make it fairly easy to do. It looks like there is, oh, looks like they found it. There was a question about the handout. The handout is available inside of your GoToWebinar. There should be a drop-down section called handouts where that is available. And it should be available after the webinar concludes as well. It looks like another question came in. There were a lot of grids on the lab displays. Can you show an example of how you would build one of those grids if there's a control for that?
Yeah, there is a control. I think that one specifically, though, is asking about the snap and the grid function and what it looks like. So,
oh, okay. I misunderstood.
Yeah, I can show that control though too. So we have the snap is here in the view, and when you pull in a tag here, you can't actually see where the snap goes by default. But if you enable grid, then this grid will pop up, and you can snap it to a specific, one of those larger grids or smaller ones. If you change this number, it will basically reduce the amount of snap options you have, but that might be nice when you're creating that. And then for the grid function itself, we have a PV grid control, but won't get too far into that one. Takes a little bit to edit. There were some questions about the websites that we shared. Sarah, do you want to show those?
Yeah, I can show them real quick. There we go. So the first website that we have listed is an accessibility website. So this is calculating the contrast between my text color and my background. So this text color is the same as the text color that we showed in one of the examples. I believe it is, I can pull it up very quickly. Here we go. So it is this example here where we have this red is the text color, and I want to see how to make it more accessible. So we did give you some examples in the presentation, but this website allows you to manipulate some of those colors a little bit easier, see if it is passing either AA compliance or AAA compliance. So AA is for people who have moderate or low to moderate vision issues. AAA is for people who have moderate to severe vision issues. And in this case, my text color and my background color do not have the required contrast ratio. They are way too similar, and so it makes it difficult to read. But if I change my background color to this gray, now I meet my AA standard. If I change my text color, I can also meet that AA standard and keep that background the same. So this is a really handy website that allows me to manipulate my background and text colors to try and find an option that is going to have a high enough contrast for everyone to view. And then the other accessibility website that I like to use is called Coblis. It's a color blindness simulator. So I grabbed the quality dashboard off of the webinar so that we can take a look at it. All I did was take a screenshot and then paste it right in. I don't need to save it as a file or anything. And then I can see what different types of color blindness users will see when they look at this graphic. So I like to go through and check these. So right now we have in the normal view, red and blue as our indicators, but we also have arrows for indicators of high and low values. So if I look at red week color blindness, I can still see those colors okay. I check my green week and I just kind of click through these and make sure that I have enough contrast. So for this dichromic view here, this red blind, I might not have enough contrast between the gray and the red, but if I change this to black, then I would have enough contrast. So I just click through these, make sure that it's going to be easily visible for the different types of color blindness that may be affecting users, and then I can go from there. It's always a good idea to also consider using alternative indicators. So in this case, we're using arrows. 2 arrows means that it is exceeding the upper limit or the lower limit. And then just a single one means that it's the upper limit or the lower limit.
Yeah,
So
spec
that's an
versus
alternative.
control.
Yeah, spec versus control. Yeah, it depends on if you're looking at control systems or if you're looking at quality dashboards. So those are options as well that we definitely encourage. It can make it easier not only for accessibility issues, but also for other folks in the facility.
Yeah. We have another question about if there are these example graphics on the forum. And right now we don't have any, but at the end of this, there's a survey, and if there's a specific graphic, especially like this one or something that you are interested in seeing that XML, we can definitely upload that. For some of the other graphics webinars where we've done the MDE graphics or something with actual code in it, we have uploaded those ones, but not necessarily the visual ones. I think that is it in question. So if, oh, no, we did have one more, never mind. So one other question is, can we import Visio files?
Yes, you can. So there is a button, I think it's under File, where you can import the SVG from the Visio file, and it will convert into part graphics. There may be some cleanup work if you've done anything that's really custom in Visio, but it'll import your primary blocks and things. Um, It looks like there is another question. Is there any information on which types of color blindness problems are most common, or should we assume that they are equally present? So that is something that you can actually Google. Yes, there are types of color blindness that are more common. It's typically the anomalous trichromacy that is the most common, with dichromatic being the second, and then the monochromatic being the most rare. So that's why I didn't click on it. Monochromatic, you only see black and white. So typically I am checking for the trichromacy, and then I might click through the dichromatic. If someone has monochromatic, they probably know about it already, because like I said, it's black and white for them, but it is very rare, and I think it's only prevalent in men as well. So that's something to keep in mind too.
Yeah, and another question came up about training courses available for building part graphics. So, Sarah, do you want to talk about the community forum a bit? And in that handout link we sent, there are 2 links to the community forum as well.
Yep, so we have a couple of links here in that handout. One is to our building graphics webinar. So you can click on that link if you've downloaded the handout. And this is our basic webinar that goes through Part Graphics Designer. And then we have another one here that is more basics. So you can watch both of those videos to find out more about building graphics in Designer. And then there are some quick tips that you can view actually on YouTube about using alarms to change that background color, and then using alarms to create a flashing background for further accessibility.
And when you're building those graphics, if you have any quick questions, that's a great use of the community forum. So you can go ahead and go to, we have a specific graphics section in Parkview, and you can just ask that quick question, and either an engineer, support staff, or even a potential other customer can answer that question for you. So this is also a great resource if you're new to building graphics.
Absolutely. And you can search for similar questions. So you can say, I want to search in this particular forum for maybe alarm. So I can search for that and see if anyone has asked a question in this particular forum about alarms. And that can be a great resource as well, just to see if someone else has maybe asked the same question already.
Great. I'm not seeing any other questions come in. If you do have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat, or again, ask those in the survey after this, and we will email you with an answer. And this will be up on the forum in the coming days or so. So thank you everyone for joining, and yeah, we'll see you next time.